How do I deal with being impatient with myself? Because after having a spiritually unconscious episode, I realize that with all the tools you have given us, I should know better by now. Interesting, uses the word tools, so and I use the word key. Well, a spiritually unconscious episode, and then when it's over, you suddenly realize, oh, I forgot to apply the tool, or let's use the word key again. I left the key in my pocket again. Well, at least you know it now, that you left the key, and at that moment, you've taken the key out, because you've taken the key of awareness out of your pocket, that suddenly you realize you had lost it. You had lost the awareness, or not lost it, but you didn't remember that you had the key in your pocket. And then it's over, and it's, oh yeah, there's the key. And then again you lose the key when the thought arises, you should know better by now, shouldn't you? What's the point? You can't do it, you see? Even after years, you can't do it. What's the point? These are the thoughts that go through the head, which means the key is left in your pocket again. Then you take it out again and realize, okay, at least I'm present now. You don't need... Whoever you are judging through your mind is a fiction anyway. It's unconscious pattern that has arisen in you, and you make it into some kind of me identity. It's a fiction. Of course, that only happens when you again put the key back in your pocket. So you continue to apply the key, and then it's okay, at least now, there's awareness now, that's enough. It's always enough for now. All you ever need to be responsible for is the present moment. And that's all you need. And then you don't make it into another problem. The fact that you had lost it or not used it doesn't become a problem, which is another episode of unawareness if you make a problem out of it. Your identity is not there. Your identity is present, and it's present now. Your identity, you are here, awake now. And then next time perhaps it happens again. And then real progress is there when in the middle of it you realize you lost it. You're in an old mind reaction, a negative reaction. And then you can choose to take the key out of your pocket and apply it, open the door to awareness, and the shift happens. And you're no longer reactive. So I recommend that you are very alert to see what kind of energy you're putting out into the world. Is it tinged with negativity, in which case you are mind-identified, ego-identified? And once you notice it, then you can apply the key. So all self-condemnation is not helpful. It's part of the unconscious patterns. Impatient with yourself. We are dealing with collective, these are not personal problems of yours. We are dealing with collective mind patterns that have been around for thousands of years, that each individual inherits. So it is a monumental thing that's happening now, that more and more humans are able to evolve beyond the inherited collective mind patterns, but they're still very strong. They have an enormous pull still. It would be silly to deny that the pull is still very strong. So it's not a personal problem of yours. It's an evolutionary transition, misperceived as a personal problem.
First of all, I want to thank you and Eckhart for everything that you've given me and are giving me now. It's so greatly appreciated. I'm not sure if it's a question, but I need a response from you to clarify. It deals with the pain body and challenges, overcoming challenges, transcending challenges. And then I think I heard you say this morning, I heard Eckhart say yesterday, the good news is we don't have to suffer. So, 5 years ago, coming up to 5 years, my son died. And I went through, he died suddenly. So it was, and he also was my best friend. So it was I can't even think about the suffering that I went through at that time. You know, it's just like, it was, I wailed, I cried, and it was, for months, I just went there, in that suffering, that pain, and that broken heart that was torn apart. And I remember, to the point I was crawling on the ground down, I have a place down by the sea, and I was there, and he loved that place, and we spent many wonderful times there together. And I was crawling on the ground and crying, and I heard him say to me, "Dad, stop that." And that came to me, a shift happened. There was a change there. Of course, I've transcended it, and I've overcome it, not completely. I never will overcome that completely, I don't think. But what I want clarification from you on is, I don't really believe, I don't fully understand that one can transcend, overcome, or have a choice in certain situations concerning that type of suffering. So there's where I'm wondering, when you say we don't have to suffer, we do have a choice. I'm saying it's not been my experience in that case.
You know, as I said earlier, and what Eckhart says is suffering is our greatest teacher. So the suffering is teaching you. And you already know that in order to go beyond that suffering, that's the evolution of human consciousness through you. So consciousness is awakening through you. So not to say that, I almost see you and sense that in order to hold on to the memory of your son, that the fear of letting go of the suffering will somehow get you be less connected to your son. Yeah. And that's not the case, and that's what your son was saying to you. You don't have to. You don't have to suffer. Because you will be actually more connected to your son without the suffering being there.
Yeah, in a way, he tells me that.
Yeah. Yeah, he's telling you that.
Yeah.
And he's saying to you, Dad, you don't have to suffer. I'm right here.
Well, could you say that again, please?
You're what?
Just tell me that I'm going to be more connected with my son by not suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the suffering is just getting in the way for that real connection of, not of the form. The form is gone. Every form will pass away, but what is left behind is the essence And that true essence lives in you. Your son and you are no different. It's the same essence. So you're going to be more connected to yourself, which is also your son. And that's the gift through his death that he's leaving you. Is that space, that empty space, that void that he's leaving behind for you to go deeper into yourself.
Well, you know, it explains, when I go to his grave these days, I don't feel that suffering, I feel peace. So that's a wonderful gift. I know he gives me those gifts, and he's more present in a very positive way, in almost a jovial way. You know, because I'm trying to communicate with him. Sometimes he just laughs at my way of making efforts to communicate with him, more or less saying, I'm right beside you, kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
It's right here. It's all right here.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
I have to share this story, this last story, because when Maya, our dog, passed away last September, and a few months before that, my father passed away. And actually, Maya was kind of in that very critical mode, even when my father was passing, and it was like, who's going to go first? That sort of thing. And it was obvious my father was going first, and I said to my father, you know, Maya's going to come right after you soon after. Will you greet her? And when Maya, she died at home in my arms, and when she was passing away in my arms, I felt my father's presence come. And then I felt them both there, joyful. It was just like they were so happy. And it was just like, wow, this is incredible. And it brought such peace and such joy. There was just absolutely no fear, nothing. I just felt this incredible sense of joy. And I knew that joy was emanating from the essence of who they were. And it was just absolutely so beautiful, you know, and they're still there. I could still feel them. When they passed, and when because my father passed first, I was able to touch into that empty voice, void of just, I remember being in, you know, getting ready to change and in my closet and just like, wow, I miss him, and that emptiness. And then I went into that emptiness, and suddenly there was this tremendous peace there. And it was just like, wow, that emptiness is God itself. And we are God itself through the form. And eventually all forms, as they always do, leave, and it leaves you with emptiness, which is really your God nature, which is God. You're left with God. And he's saying, you're left with God. Don't hold on to the suffering anymore, because the suffering and the attachment to the form is keeping you stuck. It's keeping you further away from God. And God is all around us, right here, right now, through every living being, nature, and yet beyond all of that, beyond the form. It's just here, and the forms pop up. But yet, stillness is here. God is here. That little space that Eckhart talked about all of a sudden became big. That's how it works. You take that little space and you go right into that space, and soon enough that space just there is more space in this universe than there are stars in the sky. And how beautiful it is that we get to witness the stars and have the experience of our children, of our parents, even though they can bring us to unconsciousness sometimes. But saying all that, when they're on their deathbed, do you think about that? Well, sometimes you do if you're in the grip still of the pain body, but as we begin to awaken, we tap into something else that we begin to see right through their own pain. Because that pain that they feel is no different than our own. And we know if we can transcend the pain within ourselves, so too, when we look then at the other in their pain, we don't see them only as pain, only as their pain body, in other words. We see the essence of who they are. And the pain body is just a temporary thing. We'll get these gifts, and as we become older and older, the things and the people around us pass on, and we're left with this emptiness. And in that emptiness, you can say is also fullness, because you are one with God. You've merged with the essence of who you are, and you don't feel that emptiness. You become filled with peace, with love, with joy. Thank you.
Well, first I have to say you are so very cute.
Oh.
When you answer questions.
Thank you.
And then also, as I told Kim in the morning, I so wanted you to come to China.
Oh, yes. I want to go too.
Okay, that's good.
I have been to Hong Kong a couple of done retreats in Hong Kong, but not for some years. Mainland China, do you think they would be okay with me?
Of course.
I mean the government.
Well, the government it should be okay.
Yeah.
You haven't done anything terribly wrong there before, right?
No.
So it should be okay.
Okay.
Because you're already so very popular in China.
Yeah.
Your books are very widely read.
Yeah.
And so many of my friends in the spiritual community, or even outside of this community, everybody just tells me how much they are expecting your visit.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I will come.
Oh, that's great, that's great. Oh, here finally comes my question.
Yeah.
Okay, so how can we truly accept and surrender and be present without having to go through a lot of sufferings or intense sufferings to the point that you have no other choice but to give up your ego?
Right.
And for instance, when I hear certain statements like, You must not reject your rejection, or you must not judge your judgments. Well, that made me feel even more painful, because that's exactly what I'm doing. So sometimes, most of the times, I am aware that I'm judging this or that, but how to proceed further to really accept, but not just accepting in my mind.
Ah, yes, yes. Now, as you mentioned, it is true that for some people are forced into surrender because they cannot stand the suffering anymore. And sometimes life does that to you, to a person. So the suffering becomes so intense that was the case with me. Suffering became so intense, I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't stand myself anymore. On some level, there must have been a realization that I was generating the suffering. I didn't really consciously know that, but I could not live with myself anymore, as that was the phrase that came into my head before I disidentified from the egoic self, the mind-made, unhappy me. And then there are those people who are sufficiently conscious, like all of you here, yet they are sufficiently conscious to be able to surrender or accept voluntarily without being forced into it by life. So it's a voluntary decision to come to an acceptance of what arises in this moment. But the acceptance needs to be deep enough so that it's not just on a conceptual level, but also on a deeper level, so the emotional level, for example. Otherwise, you would be lying to yourself when you say, let's say you are in a situation that generates an irritation in you. Let's say a relatively small situation. There's a long delay somewhere, you're waiting for something, there's a long delay. You can find irritation beginning to build up. At some point you realize that irritation is beginning to build up. Then your mind says, I need to surrender, I should surrender to this situation. I need to accept it the way it is, okay. And then the mind says, okay, I accept this situation the way it is. The question is, does it remain a statement in the mind? Because the true acceptance needs to go into every cell of your body. You need to be in touch. This is why, as a practice, body awareness is very helpful when you're not being challenged, just to feel the inner body, so that habitually you're able to place attention into the inner energy field of your body, which also helps you to know what's going on in the emotional field of your body. So, let's say you're irritated at the airport, the flight is cancelled, now you're lining up, hypothetical situation of many situations like that happen all the time. Your flight is cancelled, now you're lining up again to get on another flight, but there's 20 people ahead of you. Here in China, the airline industry is not very long waiting periods, and people get very upset at airports because they have to wait a long time. They suddenly start shouting, can't take anymore. So I accept this moment as it is, and then you need to detect within yourself whether you have really accepted it, because are you still feeling irritated or not? To be able to know if you're irritated or not, you need to know both whether your mind is continuing to produce thoughts of irritation, and maybe it is not because you have mentally decided you're not going to have any more. But in the emotional field, you may still be angry and irritated. So your attention needs to move into the body so that you're aware, is there still irritation in here, while my mind is saying, I completely accept this moment. Or you could say, another example of that would be, I forgive you. I forgive you. but there's something in you that hasn't forgiven. So you have forgiven on a superficial mental level. So you need to get your attention in there to actually feel what is not only what your mind is saying at this moment, what does it feel like to be in this moment? What is the feeling of it? And that will tell you, when you ask yourself, what's the feeling of this moment, that directs your attention into the body. And then you'll notice whether there's still, or whether there's a contraction still. And if there is, you can notice it. You say, oh, there's still irritation there. And then what you can do, for example, is accept whatever you feel. Acceptance, surprisingly, changes it most. It's the greatest agent for change, accepting whatever you feel. Because whatever you feel is non-acceptance, so you bring acceptance into the non-acceptance, which is in the contraction or the vibrational frequency of anger or irritation. You said, oh, it's okay to feel that. And sometimes it's possible to just drop it too. Sometimes it's saying, I don't really want that. So you take 1 or 2 deep breaths and release it from the body. And then you have released it both mentally, because the irritation usually starts in the mind making judgments about the situation you find yourself in. The body then reacts to the judgment and creates an emotion that reflects the mental judgment. So it's always good to start with the mind and realizing, I am not irritated because of this situation. I'm irritated because what your mind is commenting on this situation. That's an enormous insight, and that applies to so many instances in your life when you feel any kind of unhappiness seemingly being caused by the situation you find yourself in, by people, circumstances, and so on, seemingly caused, but 95% of the unhappiness, to use a generic term, in whatever form it arises, and 95% of the unhappiness is generated, surprisingly, by your mind. What your mind is saying about the situations that you find yourself in. Once you realize that, you realize that you can be free of that, because you don't have to do it. It's the egoic mind, the unconsciousness, the unobserved mind is generating it. So that's the first, there you stop. Then you look at the emotion. Then also you have enough consciousness left when it's not continuously absorbed by agitated thought processes. Then you have enough consciousness left to direct it into the body and examine what it is that you feel. So the 2 levels. So let me know how it goes next time you're at an airport in China, for example. Or what city do you live in?
Shanghai.
Oh yeah. Well, that's where it's all happening. It must be a very dynamic place, I imagine. And high energy, everybody's active and doing things. And that's a wonderful place to practice presence. It's ideal. And of course you're challenged all the time, but Shanghai needs you and people like you who bring consciousness there.
To bring you there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
This mind-made sense of self is also much more focused on the negative than the positive. To be free, you awaken to who you are beyond your history and your life situation. This question contains a slight misunderstanding of presence, but it's a fairly common misunderstanding. It can probably be explained very briefly. The question is, I'm afraid that if I become enlightened, I will not be able to relate to others. I will not say to my son, you can't do this or that. I will let him do whatever he wants, even if it is wrong. How can I be enlightened and have an agenda on the present moment? Won't I just allow everything to be? A common misunderstanding of presence. When you respond to the present moment, you don't have an agenda. That's not an agenda, as the questioner here says. You have an agenda when you have a pre-planned sequence of things that you want to happen or want somebody else to do, then you're not in the present moment. But responding to whatever it is that the present moment requires, that is not an agenda, that is a freedom from an agenda. So there's an error in the question. And of course, to be able to tell somebody, like a child, to stop doing something for a good reason, not because you want to exercise control, but because whatever the child is doing may be dangerous. So you have to respond to the need of the present moment, and this is what happens in presence. So presence, and again, there's a misunderstanding here, which is allowing everything to be. That is misinterpreted by some people as if it meant that you never say no to anything or anybody. So if your child climbs on a high wall and to the other side there's a cliff, you say, I allow the present moment to be as it is. The allowing to be is an internal thing rather than an external thing. So allowing to be is, it often happens, you may have observed, a child goes into a dangerous situation, the parent suddenly panics and they run and grab the child, they might even hit the child, I've witnessed it, and they shout, don't you ever go there again, it could kill you, don't you see that this is a curb, you shouldn't cross it, there's the traffic, you could have been killed, and they shout at the child, you don't ever do that again. That is non-acceptance. And the acceptance is that a child does these things and you take effective action. You don't fight against what is, you take effective action. There's not an internal resistance, which is a totally misinterpreting how a child behaves. And the shock that some parents in their panic or their fear give their children leaves a dreadful trace inside in the children. It contributes to the formation of the pain body of emotional suffering, because a child is very sensitive. When you scream at a child, even though your intentions may be good, because you wanted to protect the child, but you're screaming at the child, and of course it's like, even if you don't physically hurt the child, you are hurting the child energetically. It's extremely harmful, and this is part of non-acceptance of what is. So when a child does something dangerous, as you're present, you take effective action without fighting against the isness of that moment, which is what the child does. So you pull the child back and you explain, this is very dangerous. And there's no anger. The anger always comes when there's a non-acceptance of what's going on. It's internal. And that puts you in opposition to the present moment. And then anger arises and resentment arises, because this shouldn't be happening. So the action you take is much more effective in the absence of inner opposition. Then you can take truly effective action, and you're not causing in Eastern terms, bad karma, because when there's an outflow of negative energy, you are causing suffering to yourself and others, and that's karmic. And if you shout at a child many times, your child many times during childhood, then most likely he or she is going to do the same to their children, until somebody finally comes who discovers the power of presence and then breaks the cycle of karmic, whatever they inherit karmically. So allowing the present moment to be as it is does not necessarily mean that you cannot say no, but you say no in a clear, non-confrontational way, not aggressively. You just say, no, no. There's no negativity behind that. Very different from the aggressive no that is against what's happening. You may have seen the movie with Jim Carrey. I think it was called Yes Man. He goes to a New Age guru and listens to a seminar, and this is the character that he plays is very negative. He loves saying no to people. He's a mortgage consultant or at a bank, and his favorite occupation is to say no to people, and he's a continuously negative state. No, it's dreadful. No, you can't have a mortgage, no. And somebody takes him to the New Age guru who teaches that whatever life gives you, say yes to it, say yes to life, to everything, to everything. And at first the character resists, and then he says, well, that might be interesting. And then the rest of the movie shows you that from then on, whatever happens, he says yes, and he goes with it and gets into the most incredible and absurd situations. And of course, it's a misinterpretation of a basic truth of an inner yes to the present moment, which does not necessarily mean an outer yes to the present moment. So when somebody says, okay, offers you do you want to have this great drug? Well, they don't call it drug. I don't know what the words are. The hit. You want the hit or whatever. You don't say, I'm not in touch with these things, but you don't say, okay, I need to accept the present moment. Say, okay, I'll have it. Now, in the movie, that's what the character would do, and he does all kinds of things like that. That's a misinterpretation. You can clearly, when you're present, you can say no to something which is non-confrontational no. You do not make the other person wrong by saying no to that. There is still benevolence, there is still kindness, and you can say a very loud no and still emanate kindness or benevolence. You say, no, I'm not getting into this car with you because you're drunk. I don't want you to drive me home, and I would recommend that you don't drive home either. Get out of the car. So you say what's needed. I call that I think in the Power of Now, I called it a high quality no, as opposed to a low quality no. So, and coming back to the movie, if you haven't seen it, I'm not taking away the pleasure of seeing it by telling you that at the end, in the end, he realizes that it wasn't quite right, and I think, if I remember correctly, he realizes it doesn't necessarily mean doing everything that somebody asks you to do. It's an inner thing rather than an outer thing. So that is very common, often been asked that question, a very common misunderstanding of what allowing this moment to be, what that actually means in practice, and saying yes to what is. It's an inner yes. Whether it's an outer yes also, or whether it's an outer no, depends on the situation. But if you don't have the inner yes, then you have a loss of goodwill, a loss of kindness, as in the example of the parent shouting at the child. So you can acknowledge all the beauty that is in others, even though in the external form of you that beauty may no longer be manifested.
I often find myself comparing myself to other people, particularly my physical appearance compared to other women. And it gets very tiresome, as you can imagine. And I was wondering if you had any practical advice for helping dissolve this.
Okay, thanks. And I assume sometimes you come out as better than, and at other times as not as good as. Is that right?
Yes.
And better than feels good, and not as good as doesn't.
It all feels tiresome, to be honest.
That's a good point to reach, to get tired of an old pattern like that. Then you're ready to let go. As the Course in Miracles puts it, comparison is one of the favorite ego devices to keep the ego going. It keeps itself going, especially by comparing, whether the comparing is to do with external appearance or comparing other things, evaluating others in comparison to how in your own mind you evaluate yourself. It could be to do with knowledge, education, class, social class, strengths, physical strengths, how many possessions, worth, he's worth such and such amount of dollars, and I'm worth so much more than he, or so much less than he. All kinds of things. Implied in that is a sense of a desire on the part of the ego to enhance its sense of worthiness, and if anybody has less than you, or appears less than you, or can do less than you in some somewhat nonsensical way, it seems to add something to your sense of self. Of course, it doesn't make sense. It's a little bit absurd, but that's how the ego functions. And in reverse, if somebody, it feels to the ego as if somebody has just achieved something, or that you haven't achieved. It feels to the ego as if something of its sense of self had been taken away. So it gets deflated and is not happy. If you're really trapped in ego, you are not happy when something good happens to somebody close to you. Because it feels to the ego as if it had become diminished because somebody else has become enhanced their identity in the eyes of the ego. It's all, you can see when you explain it in this way so that you can actually see how it operates, then you realize that it is absurd to feel there's now less, you have become less because somebody else has received more of something or can do something that you can't do. And so you can see how unreal that sense of identity is. You feel diminished because something good has happened to somebody close to you. And in some cases, if the ego is very strong in you without any trace of awareness, you cannot even admit to yourself that you feel bad when something good has happened to somebody close to you. It's there as an unwitnessed emotion, and then it might come out in when you speak to that person with a desire to diminish what they now have that you don't have. And it's totally unconscious. With you, you are not totally unconscious. There's already an awareness in you that is aware of that pattern. If there were no awareness in you, you wouldn't be asking that question. You wouldn't be sitting here. You would be acting out that pattern. And next time somebody in your vicinity has just bought a new dress that looks absolutely stunning, you would look at it, if you were totally trapped in ego, you would look at it and something inside you would contract. But you wouldn't know that because there wouldn't be enough awareness for that. But that contraction as an energy field would then flow into your mind. And then words will come out of your mouth, again unconscious, to diminish the worthiness of that dress. And you might say, oh, that dress, that would look good on your sister. And the other person, who perhaps is also identified completely with the appearance, suddenly feels hurt deeply. And in both cases, the famous saying applies: they know not what they do, which of course points to complete lack of awareness. So in that sense, some people hurt each other and try to take away in order to feel. And the moment the ego is said that would look good on somebody else, it feels a little bit better already, because you've taken away a bit from that, the value, the perceived value of that thing. It's it's a delusional system, but many people are still totally trapped in that. Not with you, of course. That's not the case with you. You're not totally trapped. It still operates in you to some extent, but not totally trapped. So there's some connection with value, your own sense of worth or worthiness, which is connected to your external appearance. It could be connected to other things. It may also be connected to other things. So there's an image in you of who you are. It's a surface image of the surface appearance of your body. And the solution, of course, is very simple. It's to take your attention beyond the surface, where it usually is, the surface of your body, the surface of that which is on top of your body, the clothes. Take your attention deeper to the inherent energy field or aliveness or conscious presence that pervades who you are, the entire being. Nothing to do with the external, nothing to do with the shape of the body or what's on top of the body. And if that if you begin to go there, into that dimension, take your attention into that dimension where you are not the external form, but you sense the very essence of who you are, you sense the life that you are beyond the form, then you no longer need to identify with form. You're no longer then threatened when somebody else's form is seemingly better than yours. It no longer does anything to your sense of identity or your sense of worthiness. And then you're free. And you're free to admire somebody else's good looks. And you're free to be happy with the way you look for the time being until years pass. And then perhaps the body doesn't look that great anymore after a few more decades. You have a few decades to go. But they pass fairly quickly too. And the further you go, the more quickly they seem to pass. It's strange. And so the time comes when you notice a deterioration in the appearance, and then you begin to notice that most women around you actually look better than you, for the simple fact that they're younger. And you can appreciate the way they look because they are a manifestation of life. An external manifestation. They are life forms, beautiful life forms, without feeling threatened in any way in your own sense of self, because the life of which those lovely women around you are manifestations, you can sense that very life in its essence in you. So you can acknowledge all the beauty that is in others, even though in the external form of you that beauty may no longer be manifested as such. So, and that's wonderful freedom to appreciate the beauty that you see around you, even if your own body is no longer part of that, because there is a beauty in you that has nothing to do with form. And that one could call that the essence of all beauty. That's the very essence of life itself. So when you have the essence, you appreciate the external manifestation of it in its so-called, one could say, diluted form. In the flower, now most egos are not threatened by flowers, but in another human being, you can appreciate the beauty in another human being. And the comparison, the compulsive need to compare disappears. There isn't, oh, what about me? Do I look as... That thought pattern dissolved long ago by the time you reach the point where most women will externally look better than you. Then it's disappearing already, so you don't need to wait a few more decades to get there. Or the ego can say, okay, I have another 30 years I can identify with my good looks. So the answer, of course, is then find the essence of who you are, which is what all this teaching is always about. Find the essence of who you are so that you get in touch with the inherent sense of beingness or aliveness or presence within you, which pervades the entire so-called physical body, but is not the physical body. And as I speak about it now, you should be able to feel that within you, the fact that there is an aliveness that pervades your entire being. Can you feel that? That is more essentially who you are than the external appearance of who you are. And that is going to be exactly the same in 30 years' time as it is now. So then you become free of form, You are essentially the consciousness behind it all. So know yourself as that life or consciousness, they're the same no thing. Know yourself as that, and you're free of the ego. The ego is there as a substitute. It's to seek yourself in some form. That's the delusion, and it creates an unhappy life. So it's a wonderful thing. It's also liberating to see the absurdity of the ego. Once you see how the patterns that I just described just now, you can see how mad it is to feel diminished when something good happens to somebody else, to feel enhanced when something bad happens to somebody else, and not even know it. So let's see what happens next time. You can admire a beautiful female form without any comparison. In fact, feel more intensely the beauty that is within you when you see it out there. That's a wonderful thing. We come to the limitations of what people call their identity, their self. You can never be fulfilled for very long when you're trapped in your egoic sense of self, because ultimately it is a story in your mind that you tell yourself. It's a narrative. Me and my life. But it's not your life, because the only place where your life happens is in this moment. This moment, this is your life. But not all the memories and the accumulated conditionings in your mind. I call that sometimes your life situation. You have a life situation in time. Everybody has a past. So you have a past that you identify with, certain things from the past you identify with, good and bad. I forgot to mention that sometimes the ego does not find enough things to identify with. So let's say, for example, you don't have many possessions. Certainly you don't have more possessions than others, so you can't identify with that. Maybe your body doesn't look particularly great, so you know that your body isn't superior to most people's bodies. That was the case with me, and it still is, obviously. So, and then other things that people invest, knowledge. I know more than you. That's another big thing. And perhaps you don't have that either. You don't know that much. You don't have much. Your body isn't great. What do I do now? The ego says, I need something to... It doesn't say that, it's an unconscious process. But if it could speak, the ego said, what can I identify with? Oh my God. Oh, I got it. I've got some... You create a thought form, because ultimately they're all thought forms. If you go down to the root of all identification is thought, because even your possessions, you experience them as thought forms. My car, my house, my this. And even the body it's a thought form of body. You have a body image, a thought form. So ultimately, all identifications, although they maybe seem to be external, but if you go to the root of it, identification is always with thought. And so let's come back to this person who doesn't have anything to make him or her feel superior, because that's what the ego is looking for. And you find some superiority, so to give me a sense that I exist. And so then what it can easily do, it creates a thought form in which it perceives itself as unfairly treated by life. And the thought form, I'm not denying that there are many people who looked at it from a certain viewpoint. One could say, well, they have been unfairly treated by life. Of course, there are many people in this world where you could say that happened to them. But the question is, are you transforming that into an identity? There's a fact that may be true or not true, but are you transforming this, and then you create a thought form as somebody who has been unfairly treated by life. And that thought form can get very big and can be as powerful and even stronger than a thought form that is perhaps usually associated with an ego that says, I'm the greatest, I'm the best, nobody is better than me, look at me. Some well-known politicians may be like that, not mentioning any names. So you have a thought form. It says, ultimately, the term we could use to describe this ego identification is victim identity. And this is a very, many people have that. It's become almost fashionable these days to have a victim, to see yourself or the group of people that you belong to as a victim of others, other groups of people, not denying that people have been treated badly, groups of people by others. All these are facts. But the important question is, are you transforming that into an identity for yourself? And then it becomes a huge prison for yourself. And you have built your own prison. And then now the question may arise, if the ego seeks superiority, how can it be superior if you've been treated unfairly, if you're a victim of others? Well, it's obvious. If you are a victim of others, you are automatically morally superior to the others as a victim. That's how that identity works. It's an unconscious process, so people may not be conscious of that. But it makes you morally superior to all the others, no matter what they have achieved. It becomes irrelevant. You are superior. And that is another ego strategy that operates in many people. I do not deny that people and groups of people have become victims of other people in other groups. People do bad things to each other, and collectives to do dreadful things to each other. Millions have been killed, enslaved, all kinds of things. So you can see these as facts, but the danger is facing the facts is good, to recognize facts is good, but the danger is that you transform that into an identity, which means it becomes a thought form. This is who or what I am. That is the prison. And so this is where we are at in our evolutionary development. Most humans are trapped in the egoic sense of self. And the egoic sense of self operates both on an individual level, where it tends to create a lot of suffering that ultimately is unnecessary, and on a collective level, where it creates a lot of conflict between nations and so on. The in the collective ego, in its more extreme forms, is even more dysfunctional and more insane than the individual ego. If you are trapped in a collective ego, people have done the most dreadful things to each other. People who were trapped in a collective ego image, that's us against them, us against them. So you dehumanize other a whole group of humans mentally, because you construct a conceptual reality for them. That is who or what you attach certain labels or names to groups of people, whether it's religious or political, but they are the enemy, they are the others. So you create a collective, a conceptual identity for others and for yourself also. You belong to this group, and then you no longer can sense their inherent humanity, that they are human beings. So, and then the next step is physical violence. And that's how in Germany, National Socialism had millions killed, other groups dehumanizing a certain group. In communist Russia, Soviet Union, also millions killed internally. China under Mao Zedong, Cultural Revolution, millions killed internally by dehumanizing others and simply attaching a label, class enemies in communism. These are the class enemies, they are the traitors, the class enemies. Let's eliminate them. They are less than human, they're class enemies. Okay, total craziness. If you read history, I don't know if I would recommend that you should read a book on just 20th century history. You would go crazy if you read what did they do to each other. There was not only the warfare, there was genocide, there was within nations, nation against nation, genocide within nations. And I don't know whether you would get very depressed if you read that. You would say, or it might suddenly enlighten you and say, yes, there is a huge streak of insanity in the human mind. There can be no doubt about that. Yes, humans have created great things also, but undoubtedly there is something not right in the human mind. There is a dysfunction there hidden. Perhaps it's manifesting even more strongly now than ever before. There's something not right in the human mind, and that's an important recognition. But you don't only recognize it by reading a history book, you can also recognize it on a collective level just by listening, watching the news tonight, not the Oilers, the other news. Watching the news tonight, and most of that shows the deep dysfunction in the collective human mind that's happening. And you can also see it, perhaps, if you look at your own life, maybe not right now because you're already awakening, at least, if not awakened. But if you look back in your own life, how very often your suffering was created completely unnecessarily. And that's quite a realization when you see how suffering is created simply by misuse of the mind. Pure awareness, in your pure awareness, conceptually, of course, you don't know anything. When your mind stops, for example, now, if I stop speaking now, and you're still here too, we can do it together. I stop speaking for a few seconds, And as I stop speaking, do you need to fill that space between me stopping to speak and starting to speak again? Do you need to fill that space with thought, or are you able to simply be present in that space? In other words, are you able to just simply be? Don't suppress thought. That doesn't work. You can't hold your breath and say, I must not think. That might work, but then thinking will come up even more strongly once you start breathing again. So it's not that. You can't hold down thought. It's a pure shift into a more alert state of consciousness. Alert. Alert means, okay, now acting out alertness. Now, I'm not just acting it out. When I look at you in this weird way, I'm not thinking. And when you look at me, looking at you in this weird way, you also could experiment with that and see whether, as I stop speaking now for 10 seconds, you can just be in that space of pure awareness where you take in sense perceptions against the background of awareness. And you might notice that in that space, you don't know anything. You don't even know your name, because your name is a thought. You don't know anything in that space. And yet, you are there, conscious, present, without any movement in the mind. That's presence. That was Socrates' state when he said, I know that I don't know anything, because in that state you know that you don't know anything, and there are no words in it. Now don't confuse that, which is a state of rising above thinking. Don't confuse that with falling below thinking, which can be nice too. If you are tortured on a daily and nightly basis by your mind, to fall below thinking can be a relief. But that's not why we're here. Otherwise, I would be offering you all kinds of substances to help you fall below thinking. You can drink and smoke and go, feels so good. Don't have to think anymore. Oh, a bit more of that and a bit more of that. So that's where eventually that takes you. That's a relief. You can experience the same relief when you get tired at night. There's a moment when you're still conscious, but when you're too tired to think about your problems. So you're not being tortured by your mind, as it usually tortures you for most of the day. You're not tortured by your mind, and the approach of sleep feels delicious. And you are not thinking. I wish I could stay here, is the last thought that you have. And then you go off. And then you wake up in the morning and your eyes open And for a few seconds, you go 10 seconds maybe, 20. And then the machinery of the mind starts creaking. What time is it? What's my first appointment today? Oh, no, I have to deal with that. Oh, God. And then I have to meet that obnoxious person at 11. And there you are, gone. There was a moment of presence. And perhaps in that moment, when you woke up, you had risen above thought. When you went to sleep, you were falling below thought. When you woke up, perhaps for 10 seconds, you were on a level above thought. And that is a level where you look at the world with that bright eyes and pure, innocent perception. And everything is alive. You can sense the aliveness in everything. And the world is good at this moment. And you have no problems. And then that's present moment. Awareness is present moment awareness. It's always implied. When we use the term awareness, present moment is implied because you can only be aware in the present moment. Awareness is presence. And then you lose the present moment. You lose awareness because your consciousness is being absorbed by thinking. It sucks up all your consciousness like some parasitical parasite, psychic parasite living inside you that sucks up all. I need more. I need to think more. And then you have this monstrous thing in your head, and you think it's you. And it talks all the time. Not necessarily out aloud, it talks in here. And you can have discussions in here too. And you're identified with it. The unconscious state, lack of awareness, complete absence. You are not there. So the revolutionary, incredible thing that is the essence of the new consciousness that arises, a new evolutionary stage for humanity, which either is already, we are on the way towards it, even if, just to come back to what I said earlier, I might have lost the thread, even if we have to go through another episode of intense self-created suffering on a huge scale, which is not impossible. Even if humanity has to go through that, the awakening consciousness is not lost. It will then, when humanity regenerates, it will quickly arise again, the same consciousness that's arising in you now, and bring about the collective awakening, which are we going to experience another dark age? Maybe. But what's 1,000 years? Not much. Even 2,000 years, not that much. So I'm very optimistic. Consciousness will prevail because consciousness is the purpose of the universe. The universe there's an impulse, an evolutionary impulse towards consciousness in the universe. So all is well. And now it's up to you. Now we come to what really matters. To change the world. We've already seen it cannot be done unless there is that shift in consciousness in the individual human. And that begins with you, and it takes place every moment of your life. And you use every opportunity and whatever arises in your life as part of that. And sometimes you forget, that's fine. Sometimes you get taken over again by the mind completely. The ego arises again, that's fine. And then you wake up again. So for many of you, it's you wake up and you fall to sleep periodically. It's the new, you're present, and then the old, you're absent. And then you wake up again. And that's fine. That's part of for most people, that is part of the awakening process. And gradually, the periods of time when you're awake, present, lengthens. You're awake for longer than before. And the ability of challenges and other unconscious humans to pull you into unconsciousness decreases.
Do you believe in the law of attraction and manifestation?
Where is this coming from? Do I believe in the law of attraction and manifestation? I want to say yes, and I want to say no, because on the no level, it is the mind can want something, and you can also get it, but it's not coming from your true self. So there is a law that our thoughts can be projected and then manifested. Yes, I do see that, and that's not a belief. It's actual, I see that. There are many things that I have wanted in my life and in growing up that I have received because I wanted it so badly. But going through that, some of those things, I saw that they weren't such good experiences. So we can attract something through the mind, and it won't be really what our heart, our consciousness really desires and wants. And usually that consciousness that really desires and wants is not a selfish desire, but is a desire that would be not of and for ourself. And then in that sense, that manifestation is a sacred manifestation. It's a holy manifestation. Have you ever heard of the saying, be careful what you wish for?
I think I know what it means, but I've not really heard it.
Okay. So what do you think it means?
Can you say it again?
Be careful what you wish for.
To be exact of what you want, or I'm not sure.
Okay, so the saying, be careful what you wish for, means that you could want something. I'm just trying to find an example that you could maybe relate to. I want 10 chocolate ice creams. Oh boy, I really want that.
So do I.
Okay, so it was a good one. Must have been channeling you. So I want 10 chocolate ice creams. And I get 10 chocolate ice creams. So I'm eating 10 chocolate ice creams, and then suddenly I get sick and I throw up. So it means sometimes our mind, we think we might want something, and then we can get it, so we can manifest it, but then it's not really good for us. However, if you were really connected to the being instead of the desire of what the mind and maybe the ego desires, then you might have said, oh, I'll have one chocolate ice cream. And you may eat the whole chocolate ice cream, that one, or you might just have 3 bites and say, that's enough. I don't want any more. Because you've been fulfilled. It's the manifesting from consciousness rather than from the mind is completely different, and the experience will be completely different. Your will is completely different because it is no longer, when you're manifesting from consciousness, it's not your will but thy will. Thy will be done. You know that saying from the Bible, thy will be done? So it means it's God, it's consciousness, it's Christ, it's the Buddha, your Buddha nature that is wanting this. And it's not even so much of a want because it won't be a want in the same way. There may be a want because we are a human being, so just example of that ice cream, if you're from consciousness, and we have a human being, so we have these little human cravings. Chocolate ice cream, but it won't be 10. It'll be 1 or a half or just a bite. So does that help you?
Yes.
What do you want to manifest, by the way?
Well, I play tennis.
Wonderful.
And I have a vision board. And I even make like little trophies made from paper, just using staplers and crayons.
So you want to become a tennis pro?
Yes.
Ah, well, you know, that's not a bad thing to want to manifest. I mean, this is something that, a desire that you have. So I would say go for it, you know. Just don't think that when you get it, it's going to make you completely happy. You'll receive and get some happiness from it, especially, say, if you win, you go, yeah, right, I won. But life is about challenges, and it's about learning. So there'll be times that maybe you won't win, and you'll have to learn from that. So when you do your vision board, it's best when you make these vision boards that you also leave it open to the universe. Okay, I'll give you an example. When I was kind of through the different men, I decided to make a list of what I wanted in a man. And I actually got it. And I got Eckhart. But what we try to manifest and what we try to think we want is never complete. Because I forgot to put, I want somebody who cooks. I'm serious. I mean, when you're in a relationship, you're thinking, if you don't want to do all the cooking yourself, at least I didn't. And I didn't put down, I wanted a man to clean. I listed other aspects, which I got. So we're always on a human level going to forget something. So this is what I mean by, it won't quite make you completely happy, but you can receive and get happiness from it. Just, leave it also open to the universe. When we make goals, it's okay to make a goal, but then leave it open because maybe life knows better than we do. So we make a goal, but we kind of just leave it open-ended. Many years ago, as Eckhart was growing in his talks, there was an organizer, and he said to me, he rented I can't remember, I think it was like a 2,000 venue size that held 2,000 people. And I was talking to him on the phone, and he said, I'd be happy if I got 1,000 people. I didn't say anything, but I thought, well, why did he rent a 2,000 venue if he would be happy with 1,000? I didn't say anything. I just went, oh, okay. Anyways, we got 1,000 people. He got his 1,000 people. But what would happen if he said, I'd like to fill this venue, but then just leave it to the universe, whether it filled or whether it didn't fill. It didn't matter. It's the universe that is in action when we want the will of the universe. Have that. Make that your primary focus. So you can have this wish and desire to be a pro tennis player. It's wonderful. I used to love tennis myself. So that's wonderful, and you make that vision board. But then in your own mind's eye, also leave it open. Leave yourself open. And just say, I want this, but I'm also okay with having more, and I'm also okay with having less. I want the will of what's best for me as consciousness coming through this form, this body, this mind. Because maybe there's something even greater for you. And you just don't know that yet. We can't foresee that. So you just make those goals, but leave it open for the will of God. And that God is you. It's within you.
Thank you.
Does that help you?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Many of us here, and I personally feel very lucky to be able to be here, but I work and I come from a country which is in close proximity with a lot of chaos, death, and destruction, man-made. And my line of work is to do with responding to that in a humanitarian sense. So the question about access, which is basically those who have experienced such immeasurable suffering, such immeasurable loss, who have lost everything that they ever knew or had, and have actually found themselves displaced across the world. They say it's the largest displacement since World War II, who could never dream of attending such a place, and how to make you more accessible to people who are going through such suffering, to prevent this suffering from becoming a prolonged victim identity or a prolongation of suffering, but a transformation through conscious I can hardly articulate, but I think maybe you understood me.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, I understand. Okay. Yes, so as you know, we are attempting to reach more people through the foundation to distribute teaching material to places where otherwise it will not get to. At the moment, we have not yet succeeded in bringing it to certain areas of the world. where a lot of suffering and violence is happening, but we will attempt to do so. But another question is, how many people are actually ready for it? Because although it seems so obvious to everybody here, you might think, well, everybody must be ready for this. But the case is not everybody is ready. There will be people in those suffering countries who are ready and who have been made ready by their suffering. Many are being made ready by their suffering. Everybody, I said it a few times, everybody in this world has a spiritual teacher. A few have an actual spiritual teacher, that it might be a person or a teaching or a book. It could be, you could be a Buddhist and then the Buddhism is your teacher, or you could be a Christian and have access to the deeper dimension within the Christian teaching, then that's your teacher. Or you could be a Muslim and have access to the deeper dimension that's there. My favorite, of course, being Sufism, but that's those are those who have actual teachings or teachers, and all the others that unfortunately their teacher is suffering, and one tries to. It's only those who are ready to go beyond suffering who are then open to the teaching. The suffering is to a large extent self-produced by humans. That's the weird things. The humans produce their own suffering. And what is needed is a raising in the state of consciousness in certain areas of the world, but its refugee problem is something that is, I do not know how many of those humans who have been deprived of their home and all their usual surroundings. They no longer belong anywhere. They are. Some of those will experience a spiritual awakening through their suffering. Some will, and others will not. And some may, if we are able to get the teaching to places like that, that may help. And perhaps you can give us some ideas too. We might talk to you. And if you can give us some ideas of how to get it there, I think that would be extremely helpful. And I thank you for asking that question. So let's try see if we can do that. Thank you.